All systems go. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sean. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to CB14's Community Environment, Cultural Affairs, and Economic Development Committee meeting. It is currently 6:33, meeting online via WebEx. So thank you for joining us. We've got two agenda items. The first being Let's Green NYC with Elizabeth Walsack from Department of Parks and Recreation. So I'll hand it over to Elizabeth. So go ahead.
Thank you so much, Ed, and thank you everybody for this second opportunity to talk about this really important program that Parks has been rolling out since about earlier this year. So yes, I'm excited to tell you about Let's Green NYC. It's a strategic initiative to engage a record number of volunteers in city parks through the end of 2024. It's also New York City Parks' effort to improve the health and well-being of New Yorkers and their green space. So why Green NYC? New York City Parks is well poised to take a lead role in helping the city recover from the impacts of the pandemic, while also safeguarding the New York City's future. During the pandemic, parks became a central hub for human connection. They served as classrooms, gyms, offices, providing safe spaces for us to be together. While we're fortunate to have these spaces and we have since moved on from lockdowns, the city is still recovering on several levels. Last spring, the U.S. Surgeon General declared an epidemic of loneliness in the U.S. He listed volunteering as a way to combat this. On top of recovering post-COVID, we know that climate concerns have been increasing for years, and New York City Parks believes that by connecting New Yorkers to their local green and open spaces through volunteering, they'll feel better about the city's future while improving their own mental and physical health. Okay, Let's Green NYC. What is New York City Parks doing? Through Let's Green NYC, NYC Parks is taking several steps to improve volunteerism. We're improving our volunteer tracking. Our goal is to engage a record number of volunteers by the end of this year. To do this, we're improving our tracking methods for volunteer events. This will also help us understand and share the cumulative impact of volunteer efforts. We are expanding equity through new volunteer resources. We've created a new volunteer page that makes it easier for individuals and groups to get matched to volunteer opportunities in our parks. It's easy to navigate and has an expansive list of impact categories, so you can easily find something that matches your interests. The categories range from trail maintenance and park cleanups to teen-focused activities, things to do with your dog, and a lot more. We also created a group directory to help you find a volunteer group you'll love to spend time with. The directory helps to amplify groups that are looking for more volunteers. Hundreds of groups work in our parks and public spaces, and many of them are small grassroots groups actively looking for more volunteers. This directory will help, bring these two factions together. And then we are enhancing our volunteer engagement by celebrating our volunteers, both new and longstanding stewards, in fun and creative ways. We're also exploring new and exciting partnerships to increase volunteering in our parks and while finding new resources to support this. So why should anyone volunteer with New York City Parks? There's so many reasons. For decades, New York City Parks has decades of experience in volunteering, and it's a pillar of what we do at the agency. From street trees to gardening to sprucing up playground equipment, we know how to plan events and make sure our volunteers have a meaningful experience. Studies continue to come out linking being in nature and to improve mental and physical health. And spending time in nature can help lower your heart rate, improve your blood pressure, and even increase life expectancy. Volunteering is one way to combat the epidemic of loneliness previously mentioned. When you volunteer in a park, you're joining fellow New Yorkers and giving back to your community, and you're meeting new people, and you're building your network. We offer hundreds of volunteer opportunities around the city, and our new volunteer website makes it even easier for you to find an event and group that suits your interests. So the next slide is sort of a screenshot of the volunteer website. So it's, again, focused on matching volunteers with their interests. So some of the options you could find on this page, and I'll share the contact information with you in the chat once after the presentation. So yes, as you can see, teen focused trail maintenance, women focused, senior focused, gardening and horticulture, large groups, kid friendly, fitness. I mean, I think it's really an exhaustive list. And, you know, hopefully it's serving a lot of people and making it a lot easier for people to find things that really are, you know, are interesting to them. And now this is another screenshot of the website, and it's showing you an example of the group directory website. So, you know, we encourage communities and groups to sign up to be listed on this directory. See this, there's a little link down here in the red circle. So more volunteers can find them. I mean, I'm sure in all of our communities, we know, you know, the local friends of group that just really needs to have like a little more of a spotlight shown on them. So this would be a good resource for them. And let's see. So how can we get involved with Let's Green NYC? So you can start volunteering through Parks' new volunteer website. I'll share again the flyer with a QR code that will take you directly to volunteer opportunities. And, you know, also amplify the groups that are providing such wonderful volunteer opportunities. And new group directory just does that. You can learn what they offer, how many volunteers they have, what parks they work in, and more. And we love your help in getting more groups on the directory. So yes, what everybody can do is help spread the word about Let's Green NYC. Tell your community groups, your neighbors, civic groups that you work with about the initiative, and get in touch with us to set up a volunteer day at your local park. And then that's just a nice, wholesome photo. So I'll stop sharing. Thank you so much for your time and attention to this important initiative. And I will share some information in the chat now.
Thank you for that presentation, Elizabeth. Yeah, we'll go ahead and field questions from members in the audience, community board members first. So feel free to raise your hand.
Or it was such a good presentation. There's no question.
Everybody's busy signing up.
That sounds great. Yeah, I'm gonna put that flyer in the chat now. And I can also put my email address in the chat if anybody has questions that come to them later and want to reach out.
Annette, I did see a hand go up. Mark Young was raising a hand.
Sure.
Hi, can you hear me? Yes?
Yes, Mark, go ahead.
This is my first community board meeting, so I'm just a member of the public. Is it okay if I ask a question? Oh, okay.
Absolutely, welcome.
Thank you. I'm just curious, is there an age limit in terms of on the younger side where children can volunteer?
Yeah, that's a really good question. While we're, the rest of the meeting's proceeding, I'm gonna find that if that information's on the site. And if not, I'll make the recommendation that it's added and I will get you that information.
Great, thank you.
But it's a great question.
Thank you.
Although we do like to get them young.
Yes, I've got a little one that's wandering around here. Can't wait to get her volunteering in parks.
The cutest little gloves.
Seeing that there are no other questions, Elizabeth, thank you for your time. And we're always excited to hear from Parks. Yeah, you're welcome to stay to listen to our next agenda item. And we'll be hearing from Paige Kloss, New York City Urban Planning Fellow, to share a report on flooding in the community district. So, Paige, if you're ready, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. I had actually asked Sean, I wasn't able to join on my laptop. I was having some difficulties, so I can't share my presentation because I joined on my phone. And I'd asked Sean if she could share my presentation.
Let me go get it. And yeah,
I
Elizabeth,
could resend it through email again if you need.
I think I should be able to find it without you having to do that. And yes, Elizabeth, you are welcome to stay. You don't have to. Sorry, I can't multitask. I heard it's bad to try anyway.
Well, I'm gonna put a lot of information in the chat while this is going on, so maybe that'll.
Sorry, pressure is on because now. It wants me to re-sign in, and I'm afraid to do that since all of the,
Let me see. I'm gonna see if there's some way I can do it on my phone. I don't think that's possible,
it's
but
okay. In the meantime, Yeah.
Sean, since I just did this, could you drop it to me? Since
I
I'm
could
like,
do that yeah.
thank you so much.
it's the
Elizabeth.
least I could do for my.
I'm also willing to help
Executive
if
vice.
Elizabeth has somewhere she needs to go.
But since I learned it today, I feel very fresh.
There, I've sent it to you both as an insurance policy. Did you get it?
I got it.
Okay.
All right, I'm just gonna share my screen again, and it's gonna show my million tabs, I guess. So. That go now. How's that?
Oh, great. Can you, yeah, maximize it? Thanks so much.
Yeah, really appreciate it. And thank you all for your patience in this little hiccup. So hello everyone. My name is Paige Kloss. I was a fellow for fund for the city of New York, and I worked on finding immediate solutions as well as how to ensure flooding resilience in Brooklyn's Community District 14. If we could go to the next slide, please. So this challenge has roots in the occurrence of severe weather events, the inadequacies of existing drainage systems, and the topography of the land, being that it's low-lying. The district's history of flooding stretches back decades. Sean actually shared with me emails back from the 70s, now with recurrent problems exacerbated by major storms, as well as just light rainfall. And despite a multitude of effort, the gravity of the flooding problem persists, with inundation, as I just said, happening even during moderate rainfall events. And while there are some programs that exist to help assist residents, there remains a pressing need for both immediate and comprehensive long-term solutions, as these programs are very clearly insufficient. And collaborative efforts across governmental levels are really imperative on this, leveraging all available resource and funds especially, and expertise to confront these pressing challenges head on. Next slide, please. So I used my method as community engagement. So by adopting a holistic approach to addressing flooding problems, by directly engaging with affected communities through comprehensive surveys and qualitative insights, I was able to uncover the multifaceted challenges faced by residents and highlight the necessity of integrating their voices into policy, or your voices into policy and decision-making processes. By prioritizing open-ended questions and firsthand experiences, I was able to gain a deeper insight into resident struggles, unmet needs, and coping mechanisms, as it was unclear 311 would really show me the extent of the problem. Also amplifying your voices to empower folks as active stakeholders in finding solutions in your communities, emphasizing the significance of participatory governance and community-driven decision-making in flood management. We're able to cultivate this sense of ownership and agency within the community. And through this approach, the aim is to promote equity and a future where residents can have a say in what actually happens in their communities. Next slide, please. So this survey was dispersed to the community via email from the community board. Thank you so much, Sean, Patricia, and Sarah. There were 15 questions with a range of a range of inquiries from general demographic information to personal flooding experiences. It received a total of 85 responses. And here's just a map showcasing where respondents reported flooding at their residence. And I want to highlight that the Prospect Park Lake is right above that heavily affected area right there. Just will be important later in my presentation. Next slide, please. So as we can see, the majority of residents have been living in the district for quite a long time, showing a long-standing connection to their community, many noting having lived at the same location for 30, 40, 50 plus years even. Next slide, please. So these are just some of the quantitative questions, and then I'll be getting into the qualitative questions in a moment. So the problem was noticed at various times for residents who responded, many noting that within the last 5 years is when the problem has started to get noticeably and significantly worse, but many noting that it has been recurring for decades. Next slide, please. So many residents experience flooding multiple times a year, with only a quarter experiencing flooding once a year. A vast majority entered in a little more info to let me know that they experienced flooding multiple times within a month. So this figure isn't exactly accurate to show just how present flooding really is in this district. Next slide, please. So only 20% of respondents have flood insurance, many of them noting that because of laws and policies that they're unable to acquire flood insurance, even if they would like to, and many of them would like to, but are unable. Next slide, please. So now we're getting into some of the qualitative data. So to gauge what residents were experiencing during flooding, I asked what challenges they typically face. And there was a wide array of challenges, which included structural damage to furniture, structural damage to drywall, flooring, just a lot of structural impacts. Hazardous health conditions from contaminated sewage being inside of your home. Constantly having to participate in cleanup efforts to prevent mold growth or to quell mold that is already growing. Problems with street drainage and municipal drains, so that's just the flooding within the street, not just the flooding within the home. And substantial financial impact on cleanup, repair, and preventative measures. Just a huge sense of chaos, essentially, and just not knowing what to do and trying to do everything possible from a singular person's can't do it alone. We need resources. Next slide, please. So here I'd just like to point out in the photo first, this is where it's flooding both above ground and underground. So it's flooding in the sewers and above ground. And Sean was kind enough to send me this photo from 2017. And as we've all experienced, the rain has only gotten significantly worse since then. That was 7 years ago. And the majority of respondents saying that it's gotten worse in the past 5 years. So this is just evident that it's been a very long-standing problem. And the source that residents see this coming from, one spot is overflow from the Prospect Park Lake. There is some contestation about whether that is the case from the park, but that is where residents see it coming from. They see it coming from inadequate draining infrastructure, the combined sewer system being unable to handle heavy rainfall, climate change increasing rain intensity, an absolute lack of maintenance, and again, the topography and street design with the low-lying areas and aging sewer lines and infrastructure, and this district just not being prioritized in terms of fixing these issues in the same way that other districts have been. Next slide, please. So I wanted to see if the city has, if residents have received any assistance from the city. The vast majority of respondents have not received assistance, noting a huge frustration with lack of action from city authorities. They mentioned occasional maintenance activities such as clearing catch basins and backflow valves have been distributed, but neither of those seem to help, essentially. And many have noted outreach to 311, City Council, State Assembly, DEP, DOT, with absolutely no rectification or even a response many times. I can remember off the top of my head one resident saying that for the last 7 months, they had been calling 311 and still have not received a single call back, or no one's come to check out the issue, and just feeling very ignored. As you can see in this quote here from respondent number 67, many just feel like the district is being ignored, especially with this problem. Next slide, please. So some measures that respondents have taken, they really vary in complexity and cost, ranging from simple maintenance tasks to clearing catch basins or sewers, to significant investments in infrastructure. Many residents have taken very proactive steps to protect their properties from flooding, often at considerable expense and effort, though with little improvement for their effort. Some folks saying they've spent 25 grand, 30 grand, even more than that, and still having really severe flooding issues in their homes. Next slide, please. So there's a huge concern for health and safety, and not only physical safety, but also mental health here. Um, so there's a wide range of negative effects that residents are feeling from this flooding, such as exposure to mold, toxic fumes, contaminated sewer water, vermin in their own homes because of the sewer water bringing that in, anxiety, depression, hopelessness, and helplessness. There was a real sense of hopelessness. Just in this quote, like this resident experiencing 2 to 3 feet deep flooding in the street, just panicking anytime it rains, not knowing what to do. Just feeling like so many residents feeling like they're trying so hard to fix the issue in their homes, but just anything they do is not enough. And their health and safety is so severely impacted by this. Many saying they know it's affecting them, but they don't know how. They're like, I'm pretty sure there's mold in my home, but I don't know where. And so many also noting that respiratory conditions have been exacerbated by mold, physical strain and injury from having to clean, and just an overall disruption to their lives anytime that it rains, which causes immense and constant panic. Next slide. So how do we fix this issue? I wanted to see what residents believed would help fix this issue, to have them as active stakeholders, because they know their community very well. Or you know your community very well. So there's an urgent need for comprehensive action. So improvements to the sewer system, management of water from runoff from Prospect Park, maintenance of drains and sewer lines. So many of the folks who have spent so much money would really appreciate tax credits or subsidies for the flood mitigation measures that they've already done. Education and outreach programs would be very helpful for folks to know how to react when flooding happens and best practices. And so many folks really emphasize that there needs to be cooperation between city agencies, community organizations, and residents, because all of these folks are working at these things, but not together. And it all needs to be together in order for it to be effective. Next slide. So I have some recommendations for mitigating flooding. The first two I'm not really going to get into because they're more broad and just really apply to New York City as a whole and don't really address this district specifically. But I see, sorry, it's just kind of tiny, so I'm just trying to read. The initiatives that I feel should be prioritized are expanding the cloudburst management program to Community District 14 and funding the Lakeshore Restoration Project. Next slide, please. So the cloudburst management program utilizes a blend of gray and green infrastructure in order to manage stormwater. So gray infrastructure can be seen as sewer pipes, storage tanks, things of that nature. And green infrastructure are things like trees, rain gardens, things that are more quote unquote natural to manage rainwater. And a cloudburst can be described as a sudden intense downpour leading to flooding and infrastructure disruption. So just rain, really. Mayor Adams announced expanding to 4 new sites in 2023. Unfortunately, Community District 14 was not included within that expansion. But within my report, I laid out how this district is incredibly vulnerable to flooding and why it should be expanded to it. Again, the unique geographical low-lying areas, topography, insufficient draining systems, And all of these characteristics that make CD14 very susceptible and very vulnerable to flooding, and why it should be expanded. Next slide. So the part of the cloudburst management program that I think can immediately have an effect on the community is rain gardens, because the gray infrastructure, the sewer lines, that just by nature of bureaucracy and all of those things just takes longer. And rain gardens could be an immediate solution, as they can absorb up to 2,500 gallons of stormwater, and that's per rain event or per flooding event. Because as you can see here, the ground soaks it up, and the tree and other materials, often there's native plants planted within there as well. It soaks up the rain so that it's continually able to keep taking in more and more rain and keep diverting it away from streets and away from homes and into this one system. So currently there's a lack of any rain gardens at all in Community District 14, and this introduction could provide immediate mitigation and alleviate strain on drainage systems. Next slide. So my second recommendation is just advocacy for the Prospect Park Lakeshore restoration being funded. Oh, so sorry there, just got a call. I don't know if it got weird. Okay. So it has a budget of 20 million, which is the largest in the park's history. 3 million in funding has been secured for the phase 1 of restoration. And 17 million is still needed to further advance the project. And the reason I point out this project specifically is because environmental impacts are driving the project. There's an urgent need for restoration post-tropical storm Ophelia. It could address recurrent flooding problems, enhance environmental resilience through restoration, manage stormwater and wetland areas, and really maximize the ecological benefit with use of park materials and native plants. And this also brings it back to the original design by Olmsted and Fox, because it's just been so dilapidated and deteriorated through the years that it just needs this restoration now. Next slide. So while this is, this really lays out the problem, the research that I did, and I'm so appreciative for the folks who answered the survey, who really made this project possible. But advocacy efforts are really needed to build upon this foundational step, integrating insights from both residents and potential mitigation projects. So I also sent out a survey to small businesses, or to businesses generally. I unfortunately only received one response. So thorough research into the impact on small businesses is imperative as well. Could potentially be a fellows project for next year. And it's crucial to closely collaborate with the DEP and DOT to expand the cloudburst management program to Community District 14, and strategically identify optimal locations for rain gardens throughout the district. I am currently in contact with the commissioner of the DOT, trying to get the ball rolling on these rain gardens. Still in the beginning phases, so I don't have much information to share quite yet, but hopefully should have more information soon, and hopefully they'll begin the process of building them in the district soon. And I think that's all. Yes, thank you. There's my email. I would love to, if anyone has any questions, my email's also there if you can't think of anything right now and would like to email me after.
Thank you, Paige, for that presentation. And Elizabeth, thank you for staying on and helping us with the technical difficulties and working through the slides. I'll turn it over to folks if they have questions for Paige. Please raise your hand. Okay. Liz, I see your hand up, and then followed up with Barden. So go ahead, Liz.
Hey, so thank you so much for this presentation. I think you've really captured a lot of the things that I've heard from people who've experienced flooding and neighbors who are still experiencing really severe flooding. And it's great to kind of have that information in a way that, we can continue to use to advocate for our district. One thing I noticed, and I'm guessing, obviously the survey response map is not necessarily here, that's just where the surveys were from, right? But I kind of made this really scrappy, quick graphic here. Oh, that's my phone. Sorry, hang on. That's just comparing it to the presentation of permeable paving that we had last month or 2 months ago. And I've just noticed that there's two big holes in where there are survey responses, but no permeable paving within the permeable paving area. And I'm happy to forward this really scrappy graphic of 2 screenshots to Sean or something if that helps the district office advocate for us in any way. But two of those areas being the very northwest part of our district, near where I live in East 10th Street and Stratford, which gets a lot of the flooding from the park. And then also there's a big cluster of responses between what looks like Ditmas and Foster. And there's some a little south of that, but that's outside of the permeable paving proposal area. So I'm kind of ignoring those for now. On the, again, in kind of between Coney Island Avenue and about East 16th-ish or something. And I was just wondering if there's any, neither of those sites were selected for permeable paving by DDC or DEP or whoever was selecting those sites specifically. And I was just wondering if there's any insight you have in that or into is this an underreported study area? I know that from just being neighbors around people in my block, people on East 10th Street report this all the time. And I know Sean's reported this forward too. And I know the district office is very diligent at reporting flooding when it's reported to them. But I just, it just was interesting to me that there's a lot of places that they're sliding permeable paving, but there's no, but they don't overlap with those two big clusters I'm seeing both from in these responses and kind of what I've heard from the area. And so I know you didn't talk about permeable paving. I know that's one of many solutions, but I just didn't know if there's any reason that those sites are maybe less applicable to it, or if it's just something that, we need to work with the district office to talk to those agencies and get them to, push for permeable paving in both of those sites as part of this expansion. Thank you.
So that's a really great question. Thank you so much, Liz. Sean actually forwarded me some information on permeable paving this morning. I was only able to briefly look over it, but I am going to include it in my report. So I don't have an exact answer for you quite yet, but ultimately that will be included in the end report. So sorry for a kind of non-answer, but I'm working on it.
And Ed, can I jump in on that too?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Just to fill out that answer a little bit too, that the inquiry was made with DDC when they did their Graves End tributary project presentation as to why there were certain blocks not covered on their installation map. And they said they would get back to us. I did follow up with them in anticipation of this coming up tonight. And they haven't drilled down on why those blocks aren't on the map and whether or not they will be, but that is set in motion.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you so much, Paige. Really looking forward to those additions.
That's wonderful to hear. Let's keep bothering them. Barden, go ahead.
You're muted, Barden.
It actually looks like he's not muted, but he might be having technical difficulties as well.
Steve Cohen has his hand up while Barden figures out.
Great. Yeah, we'll go ahead with Steve and then we'll circle back to Barden. Steve, go ahead.
Can't hear you either, Steve.
Maybe in the chat.
Steve, if you want to just maybe type it in the chat. Same with Barden. Yeah, I was having some issues just signing on earlier with WebEx, so.
We'll do a whole WebEx makeover in the office when Patricia's back next week. And if this stops working for us as a platform, we'll shift. I don't know. I don't know if we'll continue remote meetings into the following meeting year, but we'll try to figure out our meantime. Sorry about all of this.
Can you hear me now, Ed?
Yes, Barton. Great.
Remarkable. I'm sure you all regret the fact that you now can. I was actually saying wonderful things about Paige in your presentation. This is something that Sean has been doggedly pursuing for more years than she'd care to admit. And I just moved to this neighborhood, and I'm just south of Prospect Park about 10 years ago. And at least my little corner of the world has been absolutely bombarded. And so I was saying I just was surprised you only had 85 responses, and that's no reflection on you. And it's just typical of when we try to gather the data that's so critical. And your report is so data intensive that I'm sorry you didn't have more from which to select. So the one thing I'd advocate is that we have an ongoing effort to gather this information from our different neighborhoods so we have a larger database on which to draw. You know, all of your stats are great. It's just I'm so sure there are more than 85 people just alone in Caton Park and my section south of there that have had terrible experiences. To one point, you know, as Liz was saying, you know, why have they not considered something for some place? The DEP was in our section south of Caton Park doing soil borings. And just anecdotally, we would go to ask them, well, what have you found? And they've said, you've got so much clay here that there is zero drainage possibility. So you would, you know, opine, why are there no rain gardens in this general vicinity? And that's conceivable, that without digging up, you know, 5 times the size of a rain garden and filling it with topsoil, that we're just not good candidates for that sort of thing. But the last thing, Sean has always tried to teach me how to pronounce his name properly. Mario Bruno, is he the one? We have a guy from DEP who has come and spoken before our neighborhoods repeatedly and is one of the most straight shooters you will ever find. And the way you immediately said, don't look to the city to do any major infrastructure improvement, you know, that's going to solve this problem. He himself said, we're talking decades. And for someone from DEP himself to have said that in front of a crowd and on video, you were wise not to even recommend that we try to go that route. So I really appreciate that you've given us that cloudbursts and rain gardens are the best, most efficient, most likely paths to pursue to, you know, resolve our problems. I'm done lecturing. Thank you.
No, thank you so much. Yeah, it's unfortunate the way that everything moves so slowly. Truly, the bureaucracy is very unfortunate, especially in situations like this.
It's also infrastructure that's 100 years old.
Oh,
You know,
yeah,
like the
yeah.
subway lines, you know, and it takes, everything takes 9 zeros. So that's what he told us. And I think it pretty much dovetails with what your take has been. So again, thank you very much.
Of course.
Steve, did you want to take another shot at or type something in the chat to share with us?
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes. Great. Steve.
Awesome. Thanks, Ed. Thanks, Paige, for the presentation. I guess I just wanted to, and apologies if Barton's question touched on this. I had to drop off for a second. But I guess the question I had was regarding rain gardens. Obviously, there are areas in the districts that have where there are a lot of single-family homes with front and rear lawns. So there is, you know, a decent amount of greenery. Obviously, not as much public greenery as we'd want. But I was just wondering if there's been like overlay regarding where the greenery exists versus where the flooding conditions are, in terms of priority areas where rain gardens would help the most. That's what I was curious about. Thank you.
Yeah, so kind of what Barton touched on of the I wouldn't say problem, but the obstacle to get over is to find the right spots for rain gardens that allow the underground to be excavated. And as Barton was saying, there's a lot of clay in your district, which makes it a lot more difficult. But so that's why I'm having conversations with the DOT right now, because I can tell them where I believe it would be best based on flooding conditions, but I don't know what the underground what's going on underground at all. Like I don't know where the sewage lines are. I don't know where the subway lines are in terms of how that would apply to excavation and those things. So that's why we need to collaborate on this. I'm able to provide from uh, vaguely from the survey where folks said that there was flooding instances, and based on information that Sean has shared with me. But yeah, that other part, the DOT really needs to determine. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
And I'm seeing just a comment in the chat. Sean, did you want to add something before I refer to Mark's comment?
No, you can go.
Okay.
You can refer to the comment.
So, Mark, you're welcome to unmute and participate in this conversation. But you're typing in the chat. I'm just going to read this. I'm not sure what the technical definition of a rain garden is, but does simply removing cement with greenery have a benefit, even if there is clay below? Paige, if you want to address that.
I can clarify my question if you want.
Yeah, if you could clarify, that would be great.
Sure. I know I live in South Midwood, which is far away, I think relatively far away from Prospect Park. So I don't think we're dealing with those issues, but there is flooding on the streets and, in the area. My question is, even if there was clay in our neighborhood, which I'm not sure there is, does simply replace, like people, it's amazing how many people get rid of their greenery and pave over it, which is sad for a variety of reasons. But even if there's a clay issue in South Midwood, is it still a benefit to have greenery versus pavement and cement? Even if it's not technically a rain garden, because I don't know what a rain garden technically is.
Yeah, so a rain garden basically just allows for I can't pull out the actual figures, but like a normal tree isn't able to hold as much because of the excavation of the ground. But yeah, any greenery is helpful in absorbing rainwater. This is just a specific measure that can be taken that is more effective than say like grass and lawns and things of that nature. It's just specifically adept to handling stormwater.
The other thing I noticed, and really quick, when it comes to the street, especially you remember there was that really bad storm in the fall where there was that really flash flooding. There on the streets, there was, I mean, I went out with some other neighbors. It was like 2 to 3 feet high, the water. And I think there's always a knee-jerk reaction to blame the city, but actually there was nothing wrong with the drains. It was just all the leaves and everything clogging the street level drain. And I feel like it's like almost more important or as important to just get volunteers in the community to clear the drains than like wait for someone from the city to come hours later and clear the drain.
Yeah, no, I think that's why it really needs to be a collaborative effort. So just knowing best practices and things that anyone can do, just really taking all possible measures. Yeah.
I believe Barton did mention Mario Bruno, and I do recall him at a town hall that was held by Councilmember Rita Joseph, where he said he was addressing residents to go help and clear the drain. So, and the residents were just wondering if there needed to be specific tools, but it's just pretty simple just to clear a drain. So, don't wait for the city to to help with that.
I have to say, it's oddly satisfying to like go out in 3 feet of water and take a rake and clear that drain and watch that massive whirlpool and like everything goes down in like 10 minutes. It's unbelievable.
Mark, thank you for doing your part.
Sean, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was gonna jump in and Mark, we can get you a picture of the technical rain garden, also known as a bioswale. So you have a picture in your mind's eye next time the subject comes up. But I really wanted to thank Paige for their hard work on this. And it's so valuable to have things collected and gathered and synthesized into this. And your suggestion that this is a project that could move forward with a fellow next year is a good suggestion, because it's there's further to go with it. And you've put it in a really good spot for somebody to take the ball and carry it forward. So thank you so much for that. And thanks to the Fund for the City of New York. They're not there, but carry my thanks back, Paige, because this program has been so valuable to this board, and we've been very lucky in terms of getting really good fellows who do a good job. And then Paige, I did hear you, you've taken your test, your final is over, you could be done, but you're like, and I'm following up with this and I'm still doing that. So that, your engagement with this is really highly valued. Thank you. And yeah, there are other things. There's still we're going to pull more into this report and keep collecting the other resources. A quick note on the lake, because you did mention that, the narrative of the lake flooding the property below it is one that is stuck, despite the fact that we have pushed back on that after getting more information from parks about how the lake is drained and how it is before storm events. But I think one of the things that was really valuable to me in this report, because, I am a bureaucrat, so sometimes I get a little desensitized, but just how emotional some of those responses were on the survey reminds me that this isn't just a minor inconvenience, that it's a stressor for people. And I think, you said chaos and words like that. And so it sort of brings home how important it is to continue this, to really improve not just our built community, but people's day to day. So thank you for all of that.
Seconding what Sean is saying too, but thank you, Paige. I'm sorry, Liz, did you also have another question? I see your hand.
I just had a really quick comment of just like, if you do ever have a storm drain and you clear it and it doesn't go down, that's when you got to get DEP out there to inspect it. So I just wanted to make sure that since we were talking about this, everyone knew about that. And sometimes there are issues that aren't just the storm drains. They can be fully clear, but the sewer doesn't have enough capacity. Just to get the information out there, since we had a pretty hearty discussion about that. Sorry to interrupt.
No, thanks. Ed, because I was going to say that one other thing. Property owners are responsible for 18 inches from the curb into the street, and that includes the leaves that have gathered at their curb, the leaves that are gathered on any drain that's in front of on side of their property. So, help your neighbors be vigilant about that. And I think we're going to work on a sort of PSA before any big storms are predicted, to see if we can get out the rakes or something like that before big storms and make sure catch basins are clear, acknowledging, of course, that a lot of our storms lately have come with strong winds that bring the leaves and the rain at the same time. But thanks for those ideas. That will percolate and we'll take action on it.
Great. I'm not seeing any other hands up. Paige, did you have any last remarks that you wanted to add?
Thank you all again, all the residents, for your for being so candid in your responses. It really, made this report possible. Thank you.
All right. So moving right along to other business. Sean, I'm not seeing, was it Mr. Mahoney that wanted to participate?
I believe it might be Mr. Young who's here to talk about helicopters.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, great.
Yeah, thanks. I
So
really,
under other business, I'll hand the floor over to you, Mr. Young. Thank you for joining us this evening.
excellent. Well, thank you so much to everyone. I know it's been a long day and for allowing me to speak just for a minute or two. I think most of you, if you were at the board meeting last week, you heard from Peter Maloney, who is with me. We work together. We're from the South Midwood Residents Association, and we're trying to embark on a strong advocacy effort about the helicopter issue that I'm sure all of us are familiar with and have dealt with for a long time. And I do want to take a second to thank Sean and her staff. I think your staff person is Sarah, who worked with me, and board member Cohen, who's on the SMRA. I think board member Alvarez already reached out to me. He wants to speak to me further about this issue. The only thing I wanted to mention is, I mean, you all know about the frequency of the helicopter traffic and, kind of the situation. I don't think I need to explain that. What I did want to mention is Peter Maloney and I and one other person from the SMRA went to, on Tuesday, there was a New York City Council hearing on this same issue, helicopter issues. Some of you may have seen the media coverage. And that there were a bunch of resolutions and proposals presented to the council that mostly focus on limiting or banning helicopter traffic from the 2 city-owned heliports, which are 2 in Manhattan, which is great. Certainly we support that. But what we wanted to communicate to this community board, and we did send a letter to the community board chair, I don't know if all of you saw it, is that most of the helicopter traffic that we see along Flatbush Avenue, that most of us in our neighborhood see, is not coming from the city-owned heliports. It's coming from the West 30th Street heliport, which is owned by the Hudson River Park Trust. Many of you may know of them. And these are almost entirely helicopters going from there, Manhattan, to JFK Airport. So, there were about 7 resolutions and bills introduced, which are all great, but only 1 or 2 of them impact the Hudson River Park Trust heliport. So, we went to there were 100 people, believe it or not, from the public who testified at this committee meeting on Tuesday, which is great, but the vast majority of them were focusing on the city-owned heliports. So what we want to do is keep raising awareness with you and our local officials. We've written letters to our assembly person, our state senator, council member, and we've started to partner with other community organizations. We've been in touch with Prospect Park South Residents Association, and we're looking to network with a few more to just raise awareness that we have to go further than just the city-owned heliports. We need to pressure the Hudson River Park Trust and the FAA to address the location where we're experiencing this issue. So, thankfully, board member Alvarez reached out to us, and we're going to speak to him. I guess, Sarah, we could talk to you on a staff level. So hopefully we can partner with all of you on the community board to continue to press the FAA and our local officials to kind of push for some change. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you for sharing that. Any questions from board members?
We do have I'll just finish with, we do have an email address, which is southmidwoodhelicopters@gmail.com. So if anybody has any questions, I'll put it in the chat, or wants to reach out, you can reach out to us that way too. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Young. So there's no other agenda items, unless, Sean, if you have anything that you want to say to address this audience.
Just Nina has it. Nina Sabgir has her hand up.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, Nina.
Mark, I actually saw something, and I, with a QR code when I was standing on my bicycle, waiting to cross into Prospect Park yesterday. I don't know, is there one organization? Is that are you part of that, or are there multiple organizations?
Mark, you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, the biggest and seemingly most influential organization is called Stop the Chop, and they have a email address and a website. They may have been the one that originated what you saw, and they're great. They're like, they brought together all of these different organizations from all over the city. So we've worked with them, we've registered with them, we get their, their flyers, their emails, their communications. So they're great. I would say the only thing to, just be wary of as people from the outer parts of Brooklyn, they're very Manhattan focused. So we have to make sure, all the Manhattan groups, they really care about the tourist helicopters that are buzzing around Manhattan constantly, which is, I get it. But those tourist helicopters wouldn't address our issue along Flatbush Avenue. So they're great. Stop the Chop is great. But we need to keep pushing.
Did you put contact in the chat?
Yeah.
South Brooklyn? Okay. Yeah, because I mean, it is, I mean, aside from a whole lot of stuff that I could go off on regarding the helicopters, just, I mean, I was bicycling actually by that, the 32nd Street, whatever, port, a few weeks ago, and it's just, I mean, choking, air pollution. It's just absolutely horrible. And at a time when when we know, and we just talked about the flooding and the environmental issues, it's, why are these rich people getting away with this kind of crap? It's just, pardon my language, but it's just infuriating. And they're buzzing right through a residential neighborhood. And I know that early when a lot of this traffic started, people were actually on local Facebook groups kind of panicking and saying, oh my gosh, there's something going on. I hear so many helicopters. What's happening? Is there, and I think now people have kind of realized that's not it, but it's really unfair to those of us who live here.
I mean, what's interesting is their FAA has guidelines that says that all helicopters should fly at least 1,000 feet higher than residential buildings. And we know at our organization, because we've been tracking them, and if anybody wants to see the data, reach out to me. They typically are at 500 feet and sometimes even less.
Wow.
And so the FAA is not enforcing the guidelines, and it shouldn't be. They made an exception for the East End of Long Island. The people out near the Hamptons complained, and they actually got the FAA to change their guidelines to make the helicopters fly over the water instead of over the houses. So, it's something, it shouldn't be just exceptions for people who live on Long Island. They should be talking about people in New York City too. So I hear you.
I agree, absolutely. We got to make some noise. That's not helicopter noise. Thank you.
Thanks, Nina. Not seeing any other hands. So again, Sean, anything else you wanted to add? I guess we will be adjourning this committee meeting at 7:36. Thank you all for your attendance.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night.
Bye.
Great presentations.